Right, evening everybody, and welcome to the Future Birmingham Podcast, a podcast where we speak about everything that has to do with Birmingham. If you don't know, where have you been? Birmingham is 2 weeks away from the local elections. Birmingham is about to see change. Currently, as we all know, Birmingham is going through some turmoil. We have bin bags, we have potholes, we have antisocial behaviour, and a whole array of challenges. Some compare my city to third world countries. Now, for me, this is rather disturbing. Someone who's born and raised in Birmingham, someone who loves Birmingham, someone who takes great pride in this fantastic city. Unfortunately, at the moment, it's not at its best. So the Future Birmingham Podcast is a platform where we invite potential councillors, candidates to come on and let us know, the residents of Birmingham, what their plans are for the next term in power. This evening, I'm delighted to have with me a chap who's been a councillor for a few terms, been in politics for over two decades, I believe, the current councillor of Acocks Green and the leader of the Lib Dem party in Birmingham, Roger. Roger, sir, thank you very much for attending this evening.
Great to be here.
I know it's 2 weeks away from the elections. I know things are very, very busy, but you've taken the time.
They are indeed. No, it's a pleasure. Yep.
So for the audience who are not too familiar with yourself, if you could just give a brief intro, please.
Yep. So I've been a councillor in Acocks Green for just over 20 years.
Yeah.
I've lived in Birmingham for 40 years. So I'm an incomer, but I think I've sort of just about earned my spurs now.
Okay.
And effectively, I've been a full-time councillor for about the last 10 years or so, leading the Lib Dem group on the council.
So you've been you've been a councillor and you've been with Birmingham City Council when they were in at a time of leadership and at a time of opposition.
Yes. So when the Progressive Partnership ran the council from 2004 to 2012.
Yeah.
At that point, I chaired a scrutiny committee on housing, and obviously since then, Labour have run the council, and I've been deputy leader of our group and then leader of our group.
So in your 2 decades, what's been your single biggest achievement?
I think the most important thing that an individual councillor does is actually, they're representing their community and fighting for their community and dealing with people's individual problems. Okay. And the reason I say that is not just because that's what makes a difference to people's lives, but also it's by doing that day in, day out that you actually get into an understanding of what are the things the council's failing at, what needs to be sorted out, what needs to be put right. Yeah. So I'm hoping that, after May the 7th, we'll actually get a chance to put some of those things into practice. Okay. But we've done a lot as a ward councillor. Yeah. Dealing with a lot of problems, and that's hopefully given me the insight and the knowledge of where the council's going wrong and what needs to change.
Okay. And what would you feel that any particular decision that's gone wrong in your term? It does happen because we're human. We can't be perfect.
What do you mean in terms of the council or?
Yeah, no, yourself. Anything that you feel that you could have done maybe better?
Oh, well, it's hard. As an opposition councillor, you can argue for certain things and you don't know quite, to a certain extent, you're not tested because you're making an argument, you're making a case, and the other side decide what happens. So I think it's a bit hard to say on that. I mean, obviously, there's individual bits of casework that maybe you could have approached differently. But I mean, as a ward councillor, but I think I've got a good reputation in my ward, so I'm happy to stand on that in this election.
Do you feel you've done enough to justify another term?
Well, the people of Acocks Green will decide that, but I think I have.
What's been the response on the doorstep?
The response has been absolutely really, really good. I mean, it's a very unusual election, this, in that my ward, for example, has typically been a Lib Dem Labour marginal. It was a split ward for quite a while with both Lib Dem and Labour councillors. Yeah. But now you go out canvassing, you struggle to find a Labour supporter anywhere. I suspect Labour won't even come second in my ward. So it's a very, very different type of election to the one I'm used to, but that's the same right across the city.
Yeah, it's a bleak story. So in your 2 terms, what measurable improvements have residents actually seen in your particular ward?
So I think that it's about service to the community. So, for example, we run a weekly face-to-face advice bureau. Okay. Most places in the city don't get that, but we do that. So when people have a problem, obviously most people will send you an email or ring you up. But if people want to talk to you face-to-face, they can do that. I think we have done a lot in terms of tackling the problems around the city in terms of fly tipping and litter.
What's actually been done on that point?
So, just to give you a practical day-to-day example, and I'm talking about things that you do as an opposition councillor, because, I would love to get into power and actually try and change the systems. But just to give you an example, yesterday we had an issue with a group of flats where the refuse wasn't getting collected, it was piling up. Yeah. I got in touch with the depot, said, can you pick it up? And they come back to me and say, oh, councillor, we can't get in because the gate's locked and we haven't got the key code. And you think, well, that's a bit strange. That's your job to have that. So anyway, I ring up the housing association that runs it. They give me the key code. I give it to the depot manager. They go back and clear out the rubbish.
Just a bit of initiative, isn't it?
And you sort of think, well, okay, the service ought to do that. And they ought to be, not come to the council and say, can you get the key code for us? They ought to. That's their job. They should do it. However, given that's where we are, that's what I'll do, and I'll get the rubbish cleared. Okay. So it's day-to-day things like that, as I say, give you an insight into where things are going wrong, but also it's sorting a problem out for your residents.
But but just on that example, for the past 3-4 weeks now, everybody's out there picking up the bin bags. Where was everyone for the past 2 years when we were rat infested? The stench in the air of Birmingham was unbearable. And okay, now the election's coming up and everyone's out to earn their brownie points, whether they're candidates or whether they're current councillors. But where has everyone been for the past 2 years since the bin strike's been going on?
So, I'll give you an example of where I've been. So I'm just trying to work out when it was. Last March, when the piles of rubbish were at their worst across the streets. So when the all-out strike had started and the council hadn't yet got the system running for picking up, giving everyone their weekly collection. And the reason for that, why that wasn't working, was that the union were effectively blockading the depots.
Yes.
Whereas the law says, you can't just block the streets. But the police were not enforcing the law.
Yeah.
And I said that was outrageous. That we've got a public health emergency declared. It was obvious to anybody, as you say, the stench in the streets was quite appalling.
And this was across Birmingham?
And right across Birmingham, absolutely. And so I called out the chief constable and said, why aren't you enforcing the law?
Okay.
And it was quite amusing because when I did that, he was actually being interviewed on the radio. And someone put my point to him and he sort of huffed and puffed and called me an armchair critic and so on. Which I thought was quite funny since I'm actually dealing with all those issues day to day. But there you go. However, the next day he sent his officers out, and they got the public highway open, and the council was able to start picking up the rubbish. So sometimes even
you've got to call it out, haven't you?
You've got to by calling it out, you actually do affect change.
This is it, and do you not feel that there's been lack of accountability, that the chief constable had to be called out, where this should have been their job anyway?
Well, exactly. This is what I'm saying about, in the case I just gave about what happened yesterday, why weren't the council officers finding out the key code? Yeah. In this case, the job of the chief constable is to enforce the law and keep the roads open. Why wasn't he doing that? And why didn't he understand that the failure to do that was causing massive problems and massive issues across the city?
There's a culture of pass the buck, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a culture of just passing on to somebody else. Absolutely. It's not my problem.
Absolutely.
Anything else measurable in Acocks Green?
Well, I think the other thing that you can say across Acocks Green is that we have got a really good sense of community spirit and community strength. I've supported a lot of the community groups. We've got one of Birmingham's longest running carnivals. We've got a lot of friends of groups for the parks, and we've got a really good youth and community interest club that looks after part of the ward, and I've been very active supporting of those. So that's not me achieving that, that's me working with the community to achieve things that are really valuable. And I think that is the role of the council. It's not to do it all, but it's to work with people that want to achieve things in your community and support them and help them to achieve more.
Okay. So as well as the bin strikes and the potholes, is there any other particular issues facing the residents of Acocks Green right now?
So I think there is a huge issue in terms of what I would generically call antisocial behaviour. Now, what I mean by that is poorly regulated HMOs,
which is a citywide
which is a citywide issue, but it's concentrated in certain areas with particular types of housing, like the centre of Acocks Green.
Big houses.
But absolutely. Houses. Exactly. The ones that are sort of most profitable for those sorts of landlords to convert.
Yes.
You've also got issues of speeding and dangerous driving, which Birmingham, suffers from more than other big cities.
But just on the country road, they've got a 30 mile per hour.
They have, yes. And they have actually now got speed cameras. Now you can argue about whether, what the right speed limit is.
Let's not go into that conversation.
And I'm sure people will have lots of interesting different opinions on that. But the point is that if you're saying this is what the rule is, the rule should be stuck to.
Yes.
And the culture where, well, I'll just do what I want. Lights turning red, well, I'll just go through it anyway.
Yes.
That sort of thing is not acceptable, and it causes, obviously on the road, it causes danger. It causes people to lose their lives. And in terms of the antisocial behaviour, it puts people off going out to the shops. They feel scared, intimidated. It makes them,
Is there any problems on the village?
Acocks Green Village?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we've got a big problem with aggressive begging, and that's hurting the village. That is now, we are now addressing that, and we've got the police on board.
How's that being addressed? Because that's another problem across Birmingham. I tend to go into I've got membership at every Greggs across Birmingham, and every time I go to a Greggs, there's someone sitting outside, and occasionally, you feel like buying them something because we're human.
Yeah.
But every time.
Yeah.
And this is a citywide problem, and it's becoming
a
problem.
And the reason it's a citywide problem is this specific issue of supported exempt accommodation, which has been scandalously poorly regulated, and that's a failure of national government.
But I don't think the beggars are all coming from the HMOs. I think there's organised crime gangs behind this as well.
No, absolutely there are, yeah. But we've got this because we've got I think it's now around 32,000 beds in support exempt accommodation. The council reckon we need about 10,000. Now, what's the difference? The difference is that because housing costs are lower in Birmingham than they are in London and the South East, for the landlords who want to exploit that sector, then Birmingham is highly attractive. So we're sucking in people from the outside and the rest of the country, and we should not be having to do that.
Yeah.
If the idea is these people live in the community, they should live in the communities that they come from.
Yeah.
They should not all be attracted to and sucked into an area where the housing is less expensive than where they come from.
Yeah. The thing is, everyone moans about landlords, and what I say is that as a landlord, you're okay having a HMO across the city, but when somebody else opens up a HMO next to your house, that's when you have a problem. But it's attracting crime, it's attracting beggars, it's attracting antisocial behaviour across the city, and I don't think there's any ward that's actually safe from it.
No, I mean they can open up
I think
property
even
anywhere.
affluent areas have now been touched by the whole HMO culture.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So, what have you struggled to deliver locally?
Well, in terms of, it is a struggle dealing with exempt accommodation. Now, there is actually this distinction that perhaps some people probably aren't aware of. There are what are legally HMOs, and we've been quite successful in stopping further growth in HMOs because they need planning permission. The distinction between those and this support exempt accommodation that doesn't need planning permission.
And now there's transitional housing as well, which is another tier.
Well, absolutely. And where they don't need planning permission, of course, you struggle to support it.
Yeah.
So you struggle to manage it and contain it. There are, well, when I say don't need planning permission, they don't need planning permission up to 6 beds. We had an old nursing home that was converted into a 70-plus bed exempt accommodation unit without planning permission.
Wow.
And it took and this is another struggle, is that the way the planning enforcement rules work in this country, I mean, I got the planning enforcement officers in the week it opened, and it's taken 3 years to get it shut. Wow. Just because of the way people can exploit the system. You put in a planning app, you're told you need planning permission, you eventually put a planning application in. It gets turned down. You say, well, there was a reason.
You appeal it,
You appeal it. The length of time it takes for a planning appeal to be heard, and when the planning appeal is even, in this case, we won it, the council won it, then they're given time, they're given 6 months to shut it down. So, each of these steps builds in time. Yes. And during that time, people are potentially making a lot of money out of something that they haven't got permission for. Absolutely. And the system is just flat wrong.
Absolutely. So as a leader of the Lib Dems in Birmingham, your manifesto puts a big emphasis on fixing basic services.
Yep.
Why should voters believe that now, when those issues have existed for many years now?
So I would say two things to that. First, we have consistently talked about those things, and consistently, if you look at for example, the motions we put into council, we're consistently focused on those issues, and we think we have a good understanding of those issues. If you look at, we actually got, quite bizarrely, a budget amendment passed, even though we didn't support the Labour budget.
Yes.
Which is a very unusual situation.
They're taking credit for that, though.
Well, they may, but it was us that put those things. So, for example, to put £25 million that they were salting away in reserves for some unknown reason, to actually get that money, which was there for a purpose, to repair our roads. Yeah. And they've been, for the last 2 years, they've basically done virtually no road resurfacing. We've now got 25 million to be spent on road resurfacing in the coming year, and that will make a big difference.
I did put it to the Labour councillor that how far will that 25 million go? But it's a start.
It's a start. It will not deal with all the problems, but at least you will start to see resurfacing crews around the city starting to address the issue. But the other thing is, you can actually look back to our record when we were in coalition governing the city from 2004 to 2012. And the thing I always quote is in 2007, Birmingham won the cleanest city in the UK award. Now, I think people might find that quite hard to believe now after all these years of Labour government and where we've ended up with their misrule. But under a Lib Dem Conservative coalition, we won the cleanest city in the city. So it can be done in this city, and it must be done, and we'll do it again.
Okay. So you've made a big pledge about the waste collection, and you've said that it will be fixed within 12 months in your manifesto. Mm-hmm. How does that come about?
So in terms of the strike,
yeah.
So the issue with the strike at the moment is that there is not just an argument about what a fair settlement is, but there's an argument about what the law says in terms of what would cause further equal pay claims. Because effectively the council are saying, well, we can't do what the union wants to do because that will create a new generation of equal pay claims, which would be totally unacceptable because that would take well north of £100 million further away from services to the most deprived people in our city and extra money on people's council tax to pay. So we can't go there. The union is saying, oh no, it wouldn't cause equal pay claims because the law says this. The council is saying, yes, it would. So I think the first thing to do is to get everyone into a room talking about it and work through trying to come to some common agreement where the law actually sits. Once you can get to some sort of reasonable understanding of that, you can then try and work out what a fair and legal compromise is to get the strike ended.
Surely the current council have got them in a room and they've had these discussions.
Well, we are told that there have not been proper negotiations since last July, and I think that's just way too long. And I, as an opposition leader, you keep getting briefings both from Unite and the council, giving you very, very different views about what the law says. Let's actually, create a process whereby what the law says can be independently assessed and examined, and come up with some common understanding of what that is. And then, we're not until you've got that ground that you can work from. You can't get a settlement because people are saying, you can't do that. That's what we want. We can't do that, and so on.
But there's also a costing issue here, isn't there? I mean,
absolutely.
How do we fulfill that cost? Which services are we going to have to cut or compromise upon or take away? Who takes a pay cut to fulfill that costing?
Well, at the moment, the strike is costing the city money. Yeah,
absolutely.
So we can end the strike, then we actually cut costs.
Yeah,
and that's what we need to do. but it must be done in a way that does not cause a new generation of equal pay claims. That would be totally unacceptable.
We talk about giving power back to the communities. What specific decisions would you put into there?
So one practical thing that we have already done, again with our budget amendment, is that we increase the amount of money that's going to local communities in terms of what we badge as community chest. Okay. So that's small scale funding. I mean, that's not going to change the world, but it does at least mean that for small projects locally, there's a bit more money to spend. But the bigger picture is to start looking at the way services are delivered and give community real input into that. And to give you a practical example, the way street cleansing is organised at the moment is all organised, as it were, centrally by managers, by council managers. I have, in my ward, regularly requested that a certain area gets more frequent street cleansing because it's near a brick crushing works, and when the lorries pull out the brick crushing works, fines from the crushed bricks fall on the pavement. So, and so I say, well, look, can that area be swept a little bit more often? And you can't do it. So what we're saying is that we want local communities to have an input. Not, it's not going to affect the overall service, that will be set centrally, but in terms of how that service is delivered, that local communities should have a say in it. And once there's a double benefit to this.
There's a difference between consulting with the community and giving them power, isn't there?
No, absolutely. So, but the point is actually accepting that within certain parameters, the local community actually knows what's needed to be done.
But they're screaming it every day anyway. I mean, with your pledge where you want to put power back into the hand of the local community, they won't be controlling the budget. They won't be controlling much. It'll just be a consultation exercise. Is it a true reflection of your pledge?
No. What we'll look at, as well as first of all, saying that the way local services are shaped should be set seriously by communities. But equally, it's actually going back to the sort of model that, again, we had under the Progressive Partnership, where we had area committees. Then it was modelled on constituencies. We need to see whether that's the right model. I think that maybe something slightly more local, maybe groups of 3 or 4 wards, but we can talk about that once we're in power. They actually have a structure whereby they can directly influence how services are set locally. So you have a formal structure, an area committee, and that you engage other partners as well, like the police and so on. And housing department, for example, working on an area basis rather than a theme basis. So there's a debate to be had, and of course, by its nature, if you're saying you want things set locally, you shouldn't decide centrally how that operates. You should actually go through a process which allows communities to have an input into
I think the local community does feel like dysfunctional, disjointed, and they don't feel like they're involved. People are making decisions from glass houses and glass offices, which are totally away from the reality of what's happening on the ground.
Yeah, and sadly, a lot of the very senior officers in the council don't even live in Birmingham. And how can you set rules on how things should be delivered if
you've spoken about vanity projects? Which specific projects are you referring to?
So I think it's about talking about the contrast between the amount of money that's been spent on the city centre. I mean, how many times has Victoria Square been refurbished and relaid, compared with, if you're looking at local centres, like mine, like Acocks Green Village, but equally you could talk about Erdington or Northfield or the other suburban centres of the city, where you struggle to get, even a few £1,000s to make some improvements. And it's that disparity between what goes on in the city centre and then what goes on in the communities where people live. You've also got, the classic example of the athletes' village for the Commonwealth Games, where
that's that as a vanity project.
Well, yeah, absolutely, because it was there was a great debate at the time about knocking down the Perry Bar flyover because we want to get rid of that because it'll look better and all this sort of stuff, and you end up building an athletes' village that's too late, so it never hosts an athlete, and yet costs the council in losses of, depending on how you look at it, somewhere between 150 and 300 million pounds. That is just an outrageous waste of taxpayers' money.
Any other vanity projects? But the point that I'm trying to get to is if we scrap the vanity projects, how much money are we looking to to claw back or save, which can go back into frontline services?
So I think, it's about, there's a big question about how major regeneration is done in the city, which takes you back to the engagement with communities. So we've got two major projects at the moment, Druids Heath and Ladywood, where the council has failed to engage properly with the community from the start.
Druids Heath, the forgotten areas, is the forgotten postcode.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we've now had a judicial review that says that the way the council did the planning application wasn't fit for purpose and they've got to go back and do it again. And Ladywood, it's very clear that they came up with, this is how we think it should be. We'll now go and ask the community. Well, actually what you should do is engage with the community, saying we think we need to regenerate this area. We've got some ideas. Talk to the community. How do you think it should be? How do you think it should be done? And the problem, with Ladywood is that they were talking about knocking down a lot of quite recently built properties because that's what the developer felt that they wanted. And then so you then engineer it around that and create a lot of kickback from the community, quite rightly.
Yes.
So, we should be designing these things with the community right from the start, rather than doing,
rather than doing it and then facing the backlash.
And absolutely, and then having to unpick it, which ends up, you're costing more time and money than if you'd done it from the start.
So your manifesto, would you say is a reflection of new ideas, or is it an admission that the basics haven't been carried out?
I'd say more the latter. The basics have just. I think one of the big problems with the way Birmingham has been run under Labour is that they somehow have this impression that if you write it down in a strategy document, it miraculously happens. Life is more difficult than
Click
that.
of a finger.
Yeah. So, I was at an event on Thursday night where the Citizens United event, where they were they've done a lot of work over a lot of years, and one of their calls is, quite rightly in my view, that there should be a charter of standards for people living in temporary accommodation. Temporary accommodation is an appalling problem that we have in this city, as many other cities have. And they were saying, so there should be some basic standards that if you're in temporary accommodation, you receive. Now, the council, set out a strategy and promised to have that charter in place by the end of 2023. But it hasn't happened.
Nowhere to be seen.
Yeah. So just promising you're going to do it in charter does not deliver it. So they were calling for it to be done this year, and I fully agree. It should be done. So it's about focusing on actually making the things you say are going to happen actually happen.
So, in your years of coalition and leadership at that time, what would you say the party's biggest achievement for Birmingham was at that time?
So it was delivering what I'm saying we need to do now, was delivering a well-run, competently run council that, didn't put council tax up the maximum each year, which is now it's going up by more than maximum. Council's going to the government most years asking for the permission to put it up by more than the legal maximum. So we kept council tax at a reasonable level. We delivered a clean city, and we didn't have all the sort of problems that we've got now in terms of people flouting the rules about things. We had proper enforcement of the rules.
So would you say that the current issues in Birmingham are down to poor leadership?
They have made. It's been a challenging time for local government generally.
Yes,
fully admit that. This is not. This has not been an easy time across the country. But Birmingham has been let down and has performed. The council has performed much less well than other comparable councils in big cities, and you can see that in terms of the relative performance of really difficult issues like child poverty and unemployment, which have risen in Birmingham relative to other big cities. Now you can argue about what structurally issues are in the UK. We've got these problems, those problems. But if you compare Birmingham, how Birmingham has done with cities like Manchester, Leeds, and so on, we have done relatively less well, and that's what we need to put right.
Okay, so a recent poll which I watched on Thursday night on Central News on the lobby was that the Labour Party stand to hold the majority. Second will be Reform. Third will be the Tories. Fourth will be Lib Dem. If it comes to it, are you prepared to form a coalition?
Yes.
With any party?
Not with Reform.
Okay.
but we'll work with. I mean, our principle is we'll work with what the electorate give us. So they're in charge of this process, not us.
Okay.
We're not going to try to stitch up some deal before. We'll see what they give us, and then we'll try and create a workable.
It's a very, very interesting time, and I mean, there's a huge insurge of independents coming through. There's so much happening in the city now, and I mean, as we were speaking earlier on, 615 candidates have put themselves forward. What's your views on that? I mean, you've been in politics for many years now. How's the demographic changed? And is having more candidates a better thing, or is it possibly dampening the whole issue?
So, okay, I think there are a number of things to say about that. First of all, as a Lib Dem, as a Democrat, I think that the constraints of a two-party system, we operate with a first-past-the-post electoral system, which tends to force you into some sort of two-party system. That's how most politics has been, since the Second World War in this country. I think that that's far too constraining, and the people's views are much more diverse than that, and it creates all sorts of problems. So in a way, I welcome the fact that we're now in a multi-party system, because people can say, well, actually, this party or that party is most closely aligned to my views. The problem is that doing that in a first-past-the-post system means you can get very, very you get results, electoral results, and representation on the council, which do not reflect how people have voted. Yeah. So it creates a very challenging situation. And I think, we desperately need a more proportional system so that what people vote for is more accurately reflected in the council. So that's one bit of it. So in one sense, I actually welcome the fact that we've got people have got a more diverse range of choices.
How many candidates have the Lib Dems got at the moment?
So candidates?
Yeah.
So we got 101 candidates. So we've got a candidate for every seat that's up on the council.
And if I can just touch on your recruitment process, is there a recruitment process?
So we've got, in terms of getting those candidates, we have a process. We have to, first of all, you have to get approved by a panel of experienced councillors. Okay. Now, obviously, people. You depend on the honesty of the answer to those people, but no process is perfect. But we do have a process and not everybody has made it through that process. Then once you've got approved as a potential candidate, then you have to win selection. So some of our seats have been contested seats, and somebody's won out of the others. Someone.
So are all of your candidates appointed or selected, or?
They all have to be approved by that process.
And what's the approval process?
So it's an interview, as I say. You have to fill in a form, and then you're interviewed by. It's a panel with at least one sitting councillor, former councillors on who've been through the mill themselves.
The reason I asked that, there's been an absolute uproar, and one of the core reasons that I started this podcast was that I was seeing candidates putting themselves forward who I felt weren't credible. Now, I'm an employer. I've been an employer for many years. When I'm recruiting for my business, obviously I want the best of the best. I stood as a councillor in the previous election as a candidate, and at that time I seen the same thing happening, where people who weren't fit for the job, right? And people will say that I'm being prejudiced or what it may be, but I'm a resident of Birmingham. And I expect the person that's representing my interests to know what they're talking about. With all due respect, if they haven't got a command on the English language, if they haven't got the know-how or the understanding of what happens in the council house, then what on earth gives them the right to be campaigning to become a councillor? Yeah. And this has been a huge problem, and your party as well as other parties. But there's certain candidates right now who can't speak a word of English. They refuse to come to hustings. They refuse to come to podcasts because they're going to get caught out. They are practically ducking me. Yeah. They know who they are. And it baffles me that they won't get in. But what they're going to do is they're going to cause a problem with the vote. And if by chance they do get in, what kind of reflection is that on the Lib Dem party?
So what I would say also, actually, I would go further than what you say, because you gave a number of things that you think candidates should be. I think there's actually a further one, which is that if you're standing for us, you should have a commitment to our policies and philosophy. Now, that doesn't mean you agree with every policy, And I know that, some of our
And,
candidates...
and I can assure you, there's candidates that I've seen standing for the Lib Dems who previously were standing for other parties. And if I ask them about your manifesto, they won't have a diddly do. They won't. I guarantee you that.
Well, as I say, no approval process is perfect. Yeah. People can, sometimes get through. I'm not going to say that everything works perfectly, but we have a process. We do our best, and sometimes it's been quite frustrating for people saying you've got to wait till you're approved and all this sort of thing. And I've a year ago I was getting people saying, "Oh, come on, we've got to get on with it," and I say, "No, we've got to follow that process through." So we'll do the best we can, and I think we've done pretty well.
There's a certain ward in Birmingham where there's, I think, 5 separate. There's quite a few councillors standing, but the one representing the Lib Dems is sharing posters of endorsements from politicians from overseas.
Well, if people want to endorse you, people want to endorse you. I'm not going to criticise our candidates for being endorsed by other people. But what's important to me is that our candidates support our manifesto and campaign on our manifesto and deliver it. That's the key thing to me. And that if they get elected, they help deliver what we've agreed as a party is what we're standing on.
Brilliant. So if we speak again in 2 years' time, for example, what measurable changes should the residents of Acocks Green see, and what should Birmingham see under your leadership of the Lib Dems?
So they should be starting to see the city being cleaned up. They should start be seeing improvements being made to our roads, and they should see real change in terms of how, as I said, the rules are being enforced. They should start to see moving traffic enforcement cameras. So if you run a red light, you get a ticket. You get points on your license. Yes. If if you're speeding, there's a greater danger of a greater likelihood that you'll be caught and given a ticket. So and that people will be starting to say, well, hang on, actually, we better follow the rules because I can't afford to lose my license if it's that. But you'll start to see an improvement in terms of how HMOs are managed and regulated. So those things will be improving, and it will start to be noticeable to people.
Fantastic. Right. We have a quick fire round. 10 questions.
Okay.
One word answers, which you've answered most of them anyway. Birmingham. Is Birmingham being run well right now?
No.
Can we fix waste collection within the 12 months?
Yes.
Should underperforming council services be outsourced?
If that will deal with them being underperforming. So potentially yes, but not always.
Has Birmingham declined over the last decade?
Has Birmingham declined? I love Birmingham. It's my city. It's where I live.
I'm so passionate. But
so
we have to face the truth.
And we've got tremendous potential. Yeah, we've got HS2 coming. We've got the sports quarter. We've got a fantastic culture. So the potential is there.
Will they ever come?
I believe HS2 will come. It'll take a while. Obviously, the sports quarter will come. These things are going to come, and they provide us with an opportunity to really up Birmingham's performance, and that's what I'm focusing on.
Do the Lib Dems accept any responsibility, however small, for the city's current issues?
I think we all share a collective responsibility, and we should.
Would you enter into a coalition again if needed?
Yes.
Would you work with the Conservatives again?
Yes.
Is your manifesto fully costed?
What we've been very careful to do with our manifesto is that there are some things in there which are specific commitments which are costed. There's a lot when you read through which is we will aim to, we will work towards, we will, and that's quite deliberate because we don't want to make any promises that we can't do.
But
some might take time.
That's political jargon, though, isn't it? We aim to, we hope to.
But it gives people a sense of direction, and it's not promising. The last thing people want is promises that can't actually be delivered.
Are residents in Acocks Green better off today than they were 4 years ago?
I believe that they're better off having had me as their councillor than if they'd had another Labour councillor.
In one word, is Birmingham currently being led effectively?
No.
Okay, 30 seconds, that camera there. Why should people vote for you for Acocks Green? And why should people vote for Lib Dems, being the leader of the Lib Dems of Birmingham?
So in Acocks Green, I think people should vote for me because they can see my track record, see what I've done over the last 20 years. And if they want more of it, I believe they will, they'll vote for me. In terms of the city, if you want a cleaner city, if you want a city where the rules are enforced and we tackle antisocial behaviour, and if you want a city where the council actually listens to residents and communities and acts on what residents' communities say, that's what you'll get with the Liberal Democrats.
Roger, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. I've called out to many a leader, many a party. The Lib Dems came on, so I really do appreciate it. Best of luck with the campaigning.
Thank you very much.
And best of luck for the whole Lib Dem team. We do plan to call councillors back in after the 7th of May.
Absolutely.
And the Future Birmingham Podcast is going to be an ongoing thing where we're going to be the mechanism between the residents and the council and the councillors, because this time there will be accountability. And I've taken it upon myself to kind of play that role. But thank you very much, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you. I look forward to coming in again.